Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you to this webinar. My name is Karim Bazabachi. I'll be the organizer for this session, and with me is our presenter, Debbie Donaldson. Please make sure you have a stable internet connection, but don't worry, if you happen to get disconnected, you can log on the same way you did, and everything will still be fine. There will also be a recording on the IOPSA YouTube channel and the plumbing app in case you've missed anything. At the end of the webinar, there is a survey. I urge you to please fill that in for us, as that will just help us improve our services towards you. When it comes to your microphones and webcams, please note that they are switched off so we cannot hear you or see you. The way you communicate with us is through the questions tab, which I'll explain in a short while. Next up, you can see this is your user interface. So this first button is the orange button, which is just used to hide and unhide your interface. Next up is the speaker. As I said, you are muted. And then we have the raising of your hand button. This button is typically used by the presenter to quickly take like a poll or just have a bit of interaction. For this morning, we do have one handout. So what you can do is you can open the handouts tab and you can extract the file directly from there, and you can open the handout during the session as well. And then we have the questions tab. What you do is you open the questions tab, you type your question in there, and then you press send. The question then comes directly to me. I'll answer it if I can, otherwise I'll save it and we will answer it in an allocated break for questions or at the end. All right, that's it from me. I'd like to hand over to our presenter, Debbie. Debbie, are you there?
Yes, I am. Welcome, hold on one second.
Okay, perfect. I can see your screen and I can hear you perfectly.
Super, thank you very much. Welcome everybody and good morning. I apologize if you came last week and weren't able to access this webinar. We had a sound issue, but it seems to be resolved and I'm really pleased to be here. This morning we're going to come back to the basics of just understanding ourselves and understanding and managing ourselves and how we engage with other people. So you see I've titled this conversation today, Communicating from the Heart, because I really would like to invite you to come back to that space of communicating from your heart. You know, there's some sayings that talk about you can see where a person comes from because the way they speak or the way they listen to you actually comes from the heart. And so I want to bring you back to that. But the concept of communicating is a big concept. So I really want to focus on particularly whether your needs are getting met or not met today. And bring you back to when your needs are met or not met, what that does to you when you think about your core journey, you being the core owner of your journey during this time and any time in your life, because this is just a moment in time. So I'm going to switch off the webcam now that we've seen each other, or you've seen me, and we're going to go through to the slides now and just go through some of what we're going to talk about. So particularly, I'd like to work on these. I've set up this session in May around 3 concepts in line with the fact that our IOPSA has extended these talks. So tomorrow, on Friday, we will actually work with the concept of off limits, and on the next week, we'll talk about connecting mind and body. But I'm going to introduce you in this communicating from the heart to this conversation, this concept of actually communicating from the heart in terms of 2 analogies. Now, if you're looking for this concept, you'll see, you will be able to Google it and find it on YouTube. It comes from a concept that's been in the market for over 20 years now, which was created by a gentleman called Marshall Rosenberg, and it's called NVC. So if you just watch my cursor now, it's NVC as what you would be looking for. And you'll find it, it's available on multiple areas. But I'm going to focus on 2 things today, and the invitation is to think about when you communicate from the heart. If you take a look at this picture, you will see that when we communicate as a giraffe, we are invited into a space that almost says, okay, I'm going to take perspective of how I'm communicating. I'm going to look at myself in terms of where I am and others. And you know, giraffe has a really, really big heart. So there's almost a sense of I can really connect with you. And if you observe them in the wild, they'll take a look at you. And as they chew on their leaves or their thorns, there's almost a sense of pacing themselves and taking their time as they observe you. And so the invitation is really when you think of a giraffe, I want you to start thinking about how do I actually focus on these two parts of the giraffe's anatomy, okay? If you look at this, where my cursor is now, you'll actually look at the ears and the mouth. You know, how do we listen and how do we actually hear things? So I'm going to give you the alternative to this. When we think and feel and act from the heart of a jackal, you will notice that a jackal is actually low down and it's quite close to the ground. And the jackal can often be alone, and there's a sense of cautiousness around a jackal, right? They have a smaller heart and they're on the watch. They're watching, their heads are up and down, and their pace is quite fast. And so when you are communicating from the heart of a jackal, there's almost a sense of you taking on those characteristics. Now, the question really is, when we communicate from the heart, are you in fact getting your needs met or not? And if you think about these two kinds of behaviors, that's where I want you to start applying your mind. And let's just have a look at this slide. And as you look at it, you will see that as you're invited to these questions, what's the likelihood of you getting your needs met? Now, you may say to me, well, why is that important? You know, so much of the conflict, of the miscommunication that happens comes back to this concept of I'm not getting my needs met, and so therefore I feel negative or I feel positive. So I want to invite you now to, you have a handout, and that handout on page 2, when you look at that handout, actually highlights the top needs of people, and it gives you some words to actually look at to understand the needs that we have in life, in just general life. And then it will also show you on the right-hand side of that page of needs, it will indicate when my needs are met, it will indicate the feelings you will have, and when your needs are not met, what feelings will you have. So now I want to ask you just to think about how you show up. Now, one of the distinguishing factors when you're trying to figure out whether you show up as a jackal or a giraffe, and by the way, there's a moment-by-moment thing, okay? We don't always show up like a jackal and always show up like a giraffe, okay? So what I'd like you to do now is look at the statement under the jackal, the picture of the jackal, and ask yourself the question, is it hard for me to express my needs? So here's the thing. Many of my clients will say, oh, I find it really hard to ask for help, especially when it's quite emotional for me. And they will say it's really difficult for me. I'm a woman, I've been, I have to nurture, look after others, and I don't actually focus on my need. Or I'm a man and I've been brought up that, men don't talk about things like that. We actually get on with things, and I don't even focus on stuff like that. I don't even know what my own need is. So I'm going to ask you to just now to put up your hands to show us which one of these two you are more like. But before you do that, let me just give you the alternative. The giraffe has an emotionally charged situation. A giraffe will actually express their needs. They will be able to say what I need and express that. And so I'm inviting you that if you are like that and you have the sense of being able to express your needs, then you in moments of vulnerability, then you would put up your hand when I invite you. So the first question now is, put up your hand now in terms of it's hard for you to express your need. And let's get a sense of how many people are in the audience where you are like that. And as soon as you can, Karim, just let me know how many people have put up their hands now.
Okay, perfect. I see the hands are going up. I'll just give it a few seconds until the majority have decided.
And while you're actually just thinking about that, I just want you to recognize that these kind of choices become more and more paramount as you go through. From a very young age, you actually learn to realize that you can't express your need from a very young age. An interesting fact is you make the first decision on how to survive at the age of 2, and then at 5 again, and around 11. So please recognize when I invite you into the space, it's a long-standing behavior. Where are we now? So I'm going to invite you now, if you are able to express your needs, to put up your hand if you're more like a giraffe. Let's have a look at those answers. Okay, and while you're working through that, Karim, any answers yet?
Yes, so I see the majority have voted on the jackal and the minority on the giraffe.
Okay, so thank you for that. I really appreciate it, and it gives us a sense of what's happening in the room. So what I also want to take you to the next layer now. When we look at the likelihood of our getting our needs met and how we'll respond, if you have a look at this question in the statement in the middle, if our needs are not met, right, we tend to respond in two ways. We can respond like a jackal, where we will tend to use these words which I've highlighted here in the block. We'll kind of blame ourselves, or we'll judge ourselves, or we'll blame or judge others. So the kind of thing that might happen in our minds is that we'll go, okay, so you see I'm not good enough, judgment. I'm the one that doesn't get it right, blame. Or we'll interpret, you see, I have never got it right, and so we'll add the missing word here is the interpret, right? So it would almost be like a BRJ, blame, interpret, and judge ourselves, but also others. They don't get me, they don't understand my needs, they don't care about me. You see, they never pay attention to me, and we'll interpret it. Alternatively, we may be able to react to a situation when our needs are not being met. We'll react more like a giraffe. We will acknowledge, okay, my needs have not been met, and actually I need to acknowledge what my needs are, and let me just clarify it and understand what's going on here. So how can I get my needs met? And so we'll go through this process of engaging in this way with ourselves or others. In terms of our ability to really communicate. And you can very quickly see whether it's the heart of a jackal or the heart of a giraffe. But let's use a very practical example that I'm going to share with you now. When we are communicating our needs, and I use the word communicating, you'll see I'll emphasize that, because often we expect people to know our needs like through a crystal ball. And they've worked with us forever. They know us. I've been married to this woman for 2 years now. She should know what I need. But the reality is they don't, because we don't express it, right? So here's when we are talking from a jackal perspective, from the heart of a jackal and a giraffe, we'll go through these steps in communicating our needs. And very often we'll start with what you don't do, and then we'll invite you to tell what we need, right? So I need you to focus now on my cursor, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the steps. And as I share with you this example, I'm going to highlight with my cursor when I'm in an observation mode, or when I've actually moved to judgment or blame or interpretation. I'll move it to the jackal so that you understand how you can kind of work with these 5 steps and how they operate. And also use your own example. I'm going to use an example that I'm hearing a lot of in the market at the moment, but you might use your own example when you think about this. So I'll just share it with you. And Steve, I will call on you first to just give me your observation. So just the heads up here. So here's a kind of talk that's going on at the moment. My turnover has dropped down, and I'm really battling, and I feel really anxious and nervous. And I have this impression that nobody cares. The government doesn't understand that I actually can't get my supplies, all the supplies I need. They don't have a cooking clue on how to get the detail right. Not only that, my staff are sitting at home and they don't understand what it's like. I'm absolutely alone, and my staff are sitting there collecting their wages, but I don't actually get to understand anything. And I hope you can follow the cursor as we go through. So I really need support at the moment, and I'm asking for support, and that would make me feel a little calmer and in control, but I'm not getting any support. So now just come back to what you've observed as I move through this process. What did you observe about that process? Steve, and I'm looking at you. What came alive for you as we were going through that process?
Debbie, well, look, going through it, and thank you very much for throwing me in the deep end so early in the morning. If you had a bull in a china shop rather than a jackal and a giraffe, I'd be fine, because that's where we are. But I think quite correct. I think there is a lot of that. We've seen it in the poll that you've done before, is that, you know, a lot of individuals are looking at it as the jackal. And I think the key thing for me and many of the groups that I've worked with is that it first comes back to what we were saying earlier, is that honest communication. And as you and I have said many years ago in some of the groups that I've worked with, is that that's the first thing that comes out, is to be able to express that. I mean, we're observing that the guys are there, that they've got a feeling of worthlessness and that there's no hope, and that, you know, the interpretation is that their needs are not being met. But I think the key thing is honest communication in terms of that. So I go back to, you know, every day we'll meet somebody, how are you? But do we actually really, mean that, how are you? Because it's not about waiting for a response, it's just moving on. And I think the key thing is to be honest with yourself and families, and then seek out that assistance. I mean, in terms of our meeting that we had yesterday, there's a lot of openness in terms of being practical. As I said to you 2 weeks ago, everybody says that we all in the same boat, but, you know, that's not correct. You know, we all in the same storm. It's just the different sizes of boats that we have that are making the storm in one way easier or harder in terms of where we are. So I think getting from where we're sitting there now, it's that what you were saying there earlier is not being open enough to be able to communicate your real feelings and where you are and what you're doing and where we need assistance. All too often, and I've been guilty of it, is that we're not open enough, that when things are really hard, that we're not expressing that to family or friends or whatever, in terms of being real. And I think that's what it gets back down to. And then we have these questions coming in, those feelings of insecurity, your needs are not being met, you know, maybe your requests are not being met because you haven't put them out there correctly, and then just a feeling of hopelessness. Sorry if that was a little bit longer than you thought, but just my observance in terms of where that is.
Thanks so much, Steve. And I just want to build on that. You'll notice when we were doing the feedback, we spent a lot of time in this block around feeling and observation right at the beginning, as opposed to moving on to actually our request. And we made a request about support, but how does the person know how to support us? They don't know how to support us. To say I need support, to me, supporting you may be making you a cup of tea, but for you, your support is actually listening to me, actually helping me analyze certain things. So I want to move on to the invitation of how you can use these 5 steps in a very practical way, but move into that giraffe kind of mode. And there's 2 invitations that we make when we move to this. The first invitation is actually this invitation by an Indian philosopher, which speaks to the ability to observe without actually evaluating is the highest form of intelligence. So instead of us interpreting and evaluating what people are doing and why they do it, let's actually just observe what is happening, so it opens up space for them to be able to fill in the gaps for us, rather than create a big wall. When we sit so much in that judgment space, there's a wall that gets created between us and others. So it kind of invites us into the space that St. Augustine asks us to do. And that's in a way what I'm asking you to do today, is empty yourself of that which you are full. Just take out that part of you that is full of maybe interpretation, judgment, and so forth against yourself or others, and allow yourself to be filled just for a second, to connect with that which is unfamiliar, understanding my needs. And that's why I gave you that resource, because it just helps you put words to the needs, because we often only know the words fine, okay, good, or bad, and we don't understand how to express where we are. And so that you can fill yourself with understanding your needs and how that makes you feel, and you can express the support you need actually. So here's an example of us talking exactly that same example, but taking the steps that we have in order to communicate from the heart, but using our giraffe pace and connecting. And what I want you now to ask you from the audience, just connect to what, you know, if you start to interpret that own thing that you had in your mind, your own example, just connect to what it would feel like if you went through these steps, okay? So I'm going to use that example. So at the moment, my turnover is really low, and it's 50% down, and I'm feeling really alone, and my need really is to be supported right now. And it would make me feel really a lot calmer and connected. So what I really want is for people, for my staff, for you as my partner, for my staff, to assist me now with understanding where the demand has dropped and where the demand is coming from. And I would also like for them to analyze that with me and see if we can connect it to whether we've communicated with our clients about that ability to meet that demand or we have not. And so, and if we can do that, it would bring me to my second request, which is for us to then plan and to put in place an action plan on how we're going to address this and how we can actually support each other. And I'm hoping what you found when you tried to connect to this is what I found for myself is when I'm looking at this and I slow down enough to talk from the heart of a giraffe, is that my pace almost slows down and I really start to clarify exactly what it is I'm trying to say as I walk through these different steps. Now, 2 years ago, when I did this in an immersion program of 9 days, we were in Houston, Texas. One of the things I missed when I was going through this process was this concept that when I make a request of somebody, they actually have the right to say yes or no. And you know, when we were working with this, I was going, what do you mean? You know, if I'm a boss, like, they must say yes. And then you know, what I realized was that, well, okay, that's then an instruction or that is a demand, but it is certainly not a request. But the value of using a request is lies in the yes or no. If I cannot meet your requirements because I don't know how to analyze or I'm actually not clear, I will then feel free to be able to engage with you in order for me to tell you what I need and how we can do it together. And then you're going to get a real answer about whether I can fulfill your need or not. And often we just, and you might need to go somewhere else to get your need fulfilled as a boss, as a husband, as a wife. We can't always have our needs fulfilled always in the same spot. And so at least we will know that. And now we have a choice about how else we can fulfill our needs. And so I hope that that invitation and linking it to the yes and the no will stick for you in understanding how that can sometimes be lost. So let's just take let's check your understanding now. And I'd like you to answer true or false in terms of the statements on this slide. For question 1, making a request from the heart includes this observation, a feeling, a need, a request, a real request, a clear request, and a feeling. True or false? Now, your answer should have been true, and you should be recognizing that the feeling I have at the beginning, if you watch my cursor related to this observation, is different to the feeling that I'm going to have when my request is met, and I can anticipate the feeling. So yes, that answer is true. Requests can be declined, true or false? The answer is true. Needs fall under 4 high-level categories as shared in the resource Compassionate Communication. The answer is actually false because there are 9 different categories. There are love, understanding, community, autonomy, survival, safety, health, meaning, or creativity. So I'm going to invite you to actually reflect on this writing that was written by Marshall Rosenberg, which summarizes this concept of communicating from the heart. And as we read through it, I want to read through it together with you because you will listen to where I emphasize and where you emphasize. So if I clearly understand, you intend no demand, I'll usually respond when you call. But if you come across like a high and mighty boss, you'll feel like you ran into a wall. And when you remind me so piously about all the things you've done for me, you'd better get ready. Here comes about. Then you can shout, you can spit, moan, groan, and throw a fit. I still won't take the garbage out. even if you should change your style, it's going to take me a little while before I can forgive and forget, because it seems to me that you didn't see me as a human too until all your standards were met. So I'm going to just pause there and just invite any comments, any questions, any statements on what you've experienced this morning and how this has come across for you, and just what you are relating to or not relating to in terms of communicating from the heart. So the invitation is, go to the chat section before I give you the resource. And as I give you the resource, and just apply your mind to that and just put in there the statements, the thoughts. And the resource I'm offering you this morning is just to start with a very simple thing of observing without evaluation. If you can start here and not worry about every step, this would be a great place to start. So let's hear where you're at. Kareem, are there any questions, statements, comments?
Okay, I see there is a statement that just came in. The statement is, good morning, Debbie. I don't have a question. What I do want to say is thank you. What you're sharing is important, and this is how our body and mind works. This will steer us positively.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and I just want to invite you to actually, you know, sometimes our mind doesn't always work like this, and our body doesn't always, and be okay with that. But really, if you can move your mind and body into this space and make that intentional choice, it really is such a powerful choice, because it almost puts us back into this, we're in charge of our steering wheel, you know. We're actually in control, and gives us a sense of control by really starting to understand ourselves, which brings us back to that personal mastery. Getting me and getting how I show up and understanding myself helps me understand how I connect to others. So thank you so much for that comment. I really appreciate it.
And then we have a question, is it possible not to know what you feel?
Absolutely. There are times when we don't know what we feel, because we are so unpracticed at actually connecting to that, and really connecting to what it feels like. So if you are finding that that is really hard for you, what I really want to encourage you to do is, I've had clients who actually don't know. So when you look at that compassionate communication resource and you identify the feelings, try to, you'll see words of when people's feelings are met and when people's feelings are not met, right? And you can have a little bit of fun with this, in trying to explore those words. So my invitation is, it's an example. I don't know you specifically, but an example is to watch people's expressions and start and listen to them on the TV or listen to them on a podcast, and try to hear what you think they are feeling. Because part of this, and I'll deal with it on Friday, is being able to connect into those feelings, right? And try to see if you can even guess at words that they, you know, the words that you are feeling, words and the expression on their face, and try to link the two. And slowly, and check in with, you know, people. Say, I'm guessing you feel like this, and I'm using these words because I actually don't connect to my own feeling, and check with them. They will tell you if you're right or wrong. That's the beautiful thing about when you communicate with giraffe ears and hearts. You can't get it wrong because people will tell you. So that's just an example of how maybe you can start to try to connect to feelings, because it is quite tough when you can't. And thank you for that. Thank you for expressing that.
Thank you very much for that. We do have just one last statement for the session. So the statement is, I've reached the age of 63 and only now realizing what is important and what isn't.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, and I'm guessing that part of that reflection, and I don't know, is that, you know, just being able to connect and meet those needs of connection and really understanding is kind of what's happening for you. And it probably is it feels like freedom, but I don't know. And if we were in a live situation, you'd probably respond to me yes or no. But what's wonderful is, for those people who are listening to that final statement that you've made, is that they can actually hear, that I'm guessing, And in a way, it gives you an indication of, you can also guess with people when you're having a conversation. And if you get it right or wrong, it doesn't matter. It's the tone and the way that you communicate that is going to help invite them to answer you in the affirmative or to share a little bit more about themselves. So if that's the last statement, I just wanted to invite you to these two kind of statements or quotes. There is wisdom, and thank you. You know, the age, that comment around age is really important. We can learn things, but there is wisdom in our vulnerability, and we may not have accessed it yet. And for the person who doesn't know their feelings, sometimes it's very hard to access because it makes us feel vulnerable. So there is wisdom there, and I encourage you to access it. But more importantly, may you give yourself the opportunity of having your needs met by communicating from the heart, by communicating them and communicating them in a way that I can hear. So thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you very much, Debbie. I urge everyone to please fill in the survey, as that will just help us improve our services towards you. And there will be a recording on the IOPSA YouTube channel and the plumbing app in case you've missed anything. I'm going to go ahead and end the session now.